Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you may be in the world. Welcome to the United States U.S. OSS Partner Community Call for November 2016. We are so thankful that you chose to spend an hour with us today. My name is Nick Johnson, and I am one of the community leads here as a part of our partner team here in the U.S. I'm pleased to be joined by Tim Walton, and I'll introduce Tim to you here in just a moment. As a part of today's call, I just want to remind you of a few important details. You are in a listen-only mode, but if you have any feedback or questions for our speakers at any point during the call, you can type those in on the messages pane of your browser. You'll see that in the lower left-hand corner. Throughout the presentation, we'll also be posting links in there. We'll have a link to the slide deck. We'll also have an email address for contact information for some of our speakers that you'll be hearing from in just a moment. This call is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation, so if you don't consent to being part of a recorded call, you can go ahead and disconnect now. The recording will be made available on our Yammer group later today. If you have any questions, you can always engage us on our Yammer group as well, and you'll see the links for that in just a few moments. So without any further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Tim as our community lead. Tim, welcome.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks everybody for spending some time with us on this November OSS community call. It's been actually a fantastic month recently on the number of announcements we made, joining the Linux Foundation. SQL for Linux is now is publicly available, so you can start using that. And also, as we announced on our last call, which is that Azure Container Services has essentially been open sourced. So some very, very big news. And the community as a whole is really starting to grow. I'm seeing a lot of activity on the Yammer. I'm seeing a lot of activity through Yammer to my email, and also just the views that we're getting both on our calls, through the Yammer community, and on the blog views is incredible. So keep getting involved, and I definitely want to see more and more of the interactivity on the Yammer page. So things are going well. I think everything's looking good on our community call. This month, we're actually going to focus on some tips and tricks for making you a successful partner in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. It's very important that I think that I go over some of these tools and tips so that you can get the right resources and know where to go when you're in a specific situation or you're in a specific sales motion. So the agenda for today is we're going to first of all go over some tooling that I think that all of you that are in the open source community should be aware of, and that is a tool that's provided by BitTitan, which we'll discuss in a few moments, but it's a tool that you'll get access to, and so we're going to do a demo of that and go over that tool. The rest of the session is going to be going over certain resources that you should be aware of as a partner. So that's things like the P-Seller program, Digital Partner of Record, and a set of other resources that are available to you. So we'll be going over that in the second part of the call. So with that, I'm going to hand over to BitTitan to go over the tool, but let's just clarify why this is important to you. So this is a tool that assesses a customer's on-prem infrastructure, actually it could be in another cloud, and helps them to develop a plan and cost analysis, or ROI, on a migration to Azure. So it's important for you to know this because one of our biggest go-to-market motions that we have right now is the Azure Everywhere. Most of you should be familiar with this program. This Azure Everywhere program basically is where Microsoft pays you, the partner, to deliver a proof of concept or workshop to a customer about Azure and about perhaps migrating certain workloads to Azure. There's different funding buckets from 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000, but also you can get paid an extra 2,000 to do an assessment, and that is exactly what this tool from BitTitan does, this health check for Azure. So when you're thinking about delivering an Azure Everywhere proof of concept, this tool can actually help you do the assessment and get that extra $2,000. So with that, I want to introduce you to Lauren and Antonio, and they're going to actually do a demo of the tool and hopefully take any questions that you may have. So with that, I'll hand over to Lauren and Antonio. Lauren?
All right, thank you. Let me just present my screen here. Okay.
Hi, everyone. This is Antonio. Lauren, let me just start by talking a little bit about how the tool works before we show the final result. So basically, the Health Check for Azure tool is an agent that you install on every machine that you have on your customer's on-prem infrastructure. And by every machine, I mean every machine that you plan to migrate to Azure or that interacts with those servers that you want to migrate to Azure. The agent will run for a minimum of 14 days. It can run for longer. And of course, you should plan that so that the agent runs throughout the more busiest time of the month. This will, and Lauren will discuss all of this in detail, but just as a quick overview, this will give you the usage of the servers in terms of everything that you pay for on Azure: computing, storage, network, processing capabilities. And it's a simple agent. It doesn't consume more than 1% of the resources. If it goes over 1%, it actually shuts down and restarts again, so that the consumption on the resources of the machine is really, really low. It passes all of the information to the Health Check for Azure services. Everything is, of course, encrypted and compliant with all of the security guidelines. And with that said, from a technical perspective, what we have to say about the tool is not too much. You install the agent, you can deploy it via SCCM, you can deploy it via GPO, and then the agent runs and gives you this report, which Lauren will talk about now in very detail.
Thanks, Antonio. So as Antonio was saying, after that agent has collected the data over a 14-day period, it's relaying it back here, and it's essentially static information in this interactive UI. So over that 14 days, you guys will be able to view within this portal distinct moments in time of data that was collected on these individual nodes and VMs, so that you guys can take a look of what's occurring in the customer's environment. So once it's presented here, you guys have two subscription-based options. It's going to give you the hardware pay-as-you-go and the workload pay-as-you-go. Now, the difference between these two options is that the hardware pay-as-you-go is looking at the on-prem environment, and then it's assessing that lift and shift to Azure. So this is giving us the closest recommendation to what we see on-prem as far as the sizing and things that they have, and then what's the closest comparison between instances in Azure where we can shift that. The workload pay-as-you-go is taking into consideration the right sizing of the environment. So that's going to take in what we saw on-prem, what we observed, and then the recommended instances within Azure as far as cost saving and right sizing of machines. So you can see here on the overall breakdown that it's going to give you the total cost analysis over a year period of what it will be in Azure. Now, this is just a recommendation. Obviously, this would change if you guys make different decisions. However, this is just to give you an idea. It's going to break down the infrastructure versus physical and virtual. So when we get the pricing from Microsoft, it's connected via an API. So when you're setting up and deploying this into a customer's environment, you're pulling from the server of whatever region they're located in. So the pricing that comes in here is accurate based on where you select that at. If they happen to change pricing within Microsoft, it will update within and reflect correctly within the portal. So we're getting our overall cost breakdown on three main categories, which is going to be the CPU, storage, and network costs. This is where we see, the most things come in as far as, physical versus virtual infrastructure. So they're totaling those costs of what they see within the environment down here into the subcategories and then getting it annually. So when you toggle to the workload pay-as-you-go, you'll see that lift and shift. There's going to be some right sizing coming into play, and you'll also see that the annual cost drops. So this tells you, things like considering, the instance types changing and taking a look at those instances in time on particular VMs where that right sizing will come in. So for that, let me just dig down a little deeper. We'll pull up our SQL Server here, and we can see a side-by-side comparison of what that looks like. Okay, so let's start with the hardware pay-as-you-go option. So as I was saying earlier, over that 14-day period, we collected the high and the low points within that agent. So you can see here, we're reviewing the CPU performance on our SQL Server, and then it's giving us these two outputs. So the dark blue line, this top line, is actually what we observed in the environment over that 14-day period. So you can see the low points and the spikes within the environment. You can see that they maxed out on their CPU usage on several days here. So obviously this machine needs some assistance. With the hardware lift and shift, even without right sizing and then moving to Azure, you can see that it's still going to save them money, and as far as right sizing on the machine of what they currently have running in their environment. So that Azure consumption is what this light blue line is here, and it's showing you what their predicted usage would be if we go with the recommended instance type, which is the standard G3 server. So as far as a total cost breakdown of the tool, and what we're looking at under a summary of each individual server, it's going to give you the instance name, the OS and version that it's running. It's going to give you the recommended instance type, and then it's going to give you the total cost of that individual server, as well as the breakdown of where those total costs are coming from on those three main categories. If you guys want to dig a little deeper, see where the bottlenecks might be on these individual servers, you would be able to review that underneath these individual tabs here, as well as under that main page that we were on. But it will tell you where that bottleneck exists, the instances in time, and then as far as the storage and the network things, so the region that it was located in and where we're getting that pricing cost from. You guys can get all of these details from the portal. They are all exportable into Excel, so you can export it from the portal. But let's take a look at the comparison here. So with the hardware pay-as-you-go option, our rough estimates of the consumption in Azure and what it would cost for the SQL server is a little over $25K. And that's taking into consideration, like I said, those three main categories. If we look at the right sizing model and we toggle to the workload pay-as-you-go underneath this same server, it's going to show us that usage in Azure is going to drop. So you can give a side-by-side comparison for the customer, but you also will be able to take a look and see where we're saving money. So you can see that the recommended instance type for this server has changed based on that output, as well as the total cost has dropped roughly $5K. So this is a great tool for you guys to give those side-by-side comparisons and show where you're saving money. Now, this might not always reflect on every server or VM. Sometimes they might be the same pricing, hardware versus workload, depending on what you're looking at. But it comes into play to make a difference when you're talking about these larger SQL servers, depending on what their environment looks like and where those cost savings are coming in. And just to touch on something earlier that Antonio was mentioning about installing the agent in the environment, this tool, the agent collects all the metadata around it so that we can get the processes of what's occurring on those servers. If they're not looking to move their whole environment to Azure, that's okay. They can exist in a hybrid environment and still run this tool. However, we do recommend that you install the agent on every node in the environment, and a node is considered a physical or a virtual machine, because the tool allows you guys to get a topology of their environment, and with the topology, it comes into play of seeing what applications are currently running on those servers. And even if they're not planning on moving all of those to Azure, it's still best to get that full picture of what's going on in their customers' environment so that you guys can understand and attack any of the low-hanging fruit for that lift and shift to Azure.
Hey, Lauren,
Yes.
We had a question come into the queue. Does the agent work only on Windows OSs, or does it work on Linux distros as well?
It does work on Linux as well. I think we do actually have one Linux here in the customer, in our demo environment. Yeah, right here. So we can see here that it does run, and then it still does give the recommended instance type. So it does run on Linux-based systems, and like Antonio said, you guys can still deploy that via SSCM, GPO, or command line. So, any other questions?
That is it for right now.
Perfect. All right, so let's jump into the reporting feature. So there is a reporting feature that comes with this as well. Basically, what these are is bare bones assessments as far as SOWs. So these are reporting features that take everything that you see in this interactive UI and put it in a PDF for you guys to white label it and provide to your customers. It's something you can build upon if you want. I have the sample reports pulled up here, so let's just take a look. So the overall assessment is going to give you the breakdown of the full infrastructure. So you can see here that it's giving you the virtual nodes versus the physical nodes, the total cost of what that is going to be for each subscription-based hardware and workload. But it's also going to bridge the gap between, you and the customer, giving an explanation of, what does this approach to Azure mean? What's the difference between the hardware mapping and the workload mapping, and explaining those pricing plans. So, like I said, it's not something that you guys have to use, but it's a great tool that we have other partners using that are building upon to provide to their customers. Because when you're talking about a move to Azure, there are so many questions that come with customers and the challenges that they face. They're coming to you as partners because they want that move to Azure, but they don't know how to do it themselves, and they need assistance. So they might not understand everything that is presented to them within the portal, and this reporting feature is a great tool to use to provide that. It's going to give them a breakdown of the total cost of ownership so they can see those side-by-side comparisons between the different subscription-based models, and then as well as the physical versus virtual. And then it will break that down a little further under each subscription base, where those costs are coming into play, the different types of instances, and where those data centers are located. And then if they want to dig a little deeper, you guys can provide the breakdown of the physical versus the virtual analytics reports. So rather than an overall assessment summary, it will just give them a summary of the virtual infrastructure or the physical infrastructure and provide them a little bit more of the graph details and usage reports. So it does the same thing at the top of these assessments, giving the approach and explaining the pricing plans. But down here at the bottom, it does give the total cost of ownership for those pricing plans, and then as well as additional graphs on how those would be divided up via the data centers, as well as the workload optimization, so they can see some pie charts and things like that. So it's just a great tool to have. Like I said, you don't have to use it, but we do have a lot of partners that take advantage of it, especially since you can white label it with your own branding and provide it to the customer.
Just one note on what Lauren was saying. When we talk about physical and virtual, we're talking about the on-prem infrastructure. And the reason we break this down into physical and virtual is that this tool will, of course, give you a return of investment. It will give you a value of what you will need to spend on Azure. But your customers still need to identify how much they spend on-prem with data centers, with people to manage those servers, etc. And it's often easier to identify that by breaking it down into what they have in their virtual infrastructure on-prem and what they have on physical servers, how much they pay on contracts for physical servers, etc. And that's why we break it down into physical and virtual. We're talking about on-prem infrastructure.
Perfect. Thanks, Antonio. So as I was saying earlier, you can export all of this data from the portal. That would be done via this button here. And you guys have the tiered infrastructure over here on the left-hand side. So if you're looking for a specific server and you don't want to scroll through here, you can dive down. And those main three categories are available underneath the main dashboard for you to view under each subscription. So if you want to look at any of the bottlenecks or the instance types for each individual server as a whole, you guys can drill down into them and get more details, or you can view it on the main dashboard page. But some of the data that it provides is good for you guys to see as far as the CPU utilization, observed memory. You guys can review the IOPS that are available for each individual VM when you drill into it. If you guys want to look at a spike over a day, over that 14-day period, you can also drill down into an individual day and review that hour by hour. So it gives you guys granular detail into the environment, probably more than the customer would be aware of, even if they're providing you, with a server list and the things that they have on their server. So business case scenarios for this tool not only are for a recommended usage in Azure, but it can also give you, for a security report. So the second part of this tool is the migration planner. And essentially what this does is it's providing information back for us as far as server details. So this is where the agent comes into play as far as mapping applications, showing us that interconnectivity between servers, as well as any summary report on the servers. So we can get a list of the firewall rules that are set, inbound and outbound, DNS apps that are running, and things like that. So you guys can see the individual processes that are being observed on those machines. So by default, the tool will create the subgroups for you. If you want to create them together on the front end, you can, but the tool will do it automatically. So here within our demo environment, we have three groupings. It's the Microsoft Outlook group, the SQL migration group, and then you'll notice there's a group that says no agent. And we did this on purpose to show you what I was talking about, wanting to install it in the whole environment, even if they're not planning to move all of their servers to Azure. And I'll show you how that comes into play here. So let's open up the SQL migration group, and we'll take a look at our SQL server that we were looking at earlier. So you'll notice when I have these groups highlighted that as soon as I have the box highlighted over here on the right-hand side, there's an application interconnectivity column, and it has every application that's currently running within that group. So if I want to highlight our server, let me find it here. It might be in the other subgroup. So we highlighted an individual server, and it's going to display the applications that are currently running. Now, there's also another way to note as far as if a server had an agent installed within the environment in the migration planner portion. Obviously, when we collect the data on the agent, we're able to collect the name of the VM or server and then the OS that's running. So you'll see it lit up green here, and it will provide you with a name. Within the migration planner, if there is not an agent installed on a server, it will still be able to see the server within the environment. It will only display red, though, and give you a list of the IP addresses that are associated with it, because that's all of the data that we're able to pull from it as far as pulling the system. So mapping the applications here, I'm just going to go ahead and select all of them so that you guys can see here within the environment. So I have all of the applications highlighted, and it's showing you the different servers that this is communicating with. So if you're planning a move to Azure, especially if you're not planning to move everything, this is a great tool to use to make sure that, one, you're attacking the low-hanging fruit that you can move, that's going to be an easy shift to Azure, and two, when you're moving certain servers, you're not leaving off any applications or processes that would affect their environment and cause any issues. So this is a great way for you guys to understand what's being communicated within their environment and what that looks like. So within here, you can see the applications that are currently running. If I want to understand the processes behind that, I can actually just click on an individual application line. It's going to tell me what server it's communicating with. So we can see here, this one actually communicates outside the group. So I'll toggle back to that in just a second. So we can see here that it's telling us that it's communicating with the SQL Server and the Agami PHL4, L3, excuse me. So you can see that it lists the IP addresses so that you can see the connectivity, as well as what process is currently running. So you guys can see that. And then as far as opening up the details here, it'll let you know the security access. So you guys are able to get that granular detail. And then if we're just looking at an individual server, we can toggle down to the summary section, and it's going to give us, one, all of the data that we can find on the dashboard as far as pricing structure, and two, all of those things that I was telling you about the firewall rules and installed apps and the CPU usage. So all of this data is downloadable and exportable from the portal, but it's also something that you can view between. So you can see here that it's going to give me the total cost of ownership for this particular VM within Azure, and if I want to toggle the type of subscription-based model that I'm looking at, I would just select it, and that will reflect the pricing changes here. So you guys don't have to toggle back and forth between the migration planner and the dashboard to know what the pricing looks like. You can do that as well. And then as far as any firewall rules, you can just hit open. It's going to let you know any of the inbound and outbound rules. You can open those up so that if you guys need to duplicate that server within Azure, you have all of these things. Plus, this can be used as a security assessment to make sure that they're within compliance. They don't have any things open to the outside world on servers that need to be closed off, and that they're meeting all of those, requirements. So let me show you what it looks like when we're communicating with a server that has no agent installed, and why that causes issues. So it's not that it's required to install it on every individual node, like I said, but it's going to make your life easier as a partner because it allows you to understand more of what's going on in their environment. So if we're looking at a process here, you can see that it's giving us the subgroups, so we can see the IP ranges here, but we don't know the names of those servers, and we don't know what's occurring on them. So all we have is just the IP address. When we're mapping an application that communicates with those, we're severely limited to understanding what it is. So we can see that this server over here in our environment that we scanned is communicating here, but we don't know what it's communicating with. So if I highlight the process, it can't tell me the server name, it can only give me the IP address, and then it limits what is there. So it requires more investigative work on your end to go back into the customer's environment, figure out what the name of that server is, what applications are running on that server, and if it's one that they're not planning to move, that's okay, but you need to make sure that this process right here is accounted for within Azure if they're not moving that server. So there are different ways to do that, but it just makes it easier on you as partners to get that full encompassing understanding of the customer's environment if you just scan all of them. And it also lets the customer know what's going on as well. Depending on how large their environment is, the larger it is, the more things that can happen that go undetected.
So, and to follow up on what Lauren was just saying, we are now looking at the migration planner. So it does groups, and it does also a security assessment. So our tool has several components. It has the component that will give you the pricing on Azure, which has more of a return of investment and something you can show more to the decision makers on your customers. But it also has a component of software assessment. It will flag all of the operating systems you have there. It will flag the operating systems or the SQL Server versions which are no longer supported. But in this case, it will do a security assessment. It will give you all of that. This is more to show to the IT manager, to the more technical people. And it is worth mentioning that the importance of knowing which firewall ports and which servers talk to each other is good because of the security component of it, but it also helps you plan the connectivity you're going to have between on-prem and Azure. It's very important for you to know that when you move a SQL server, then that SQL server still talks on port 1, 2, and 3 with servers back on-prem. It helps you plan exactly what you need on that pipeline between on-prem and Azure. And that's also important to mention.
All right, thanks. So that's pretty much it for the demo. Like I said, you guys can export this data, so if you want to move the migration settings, it's downloadable here. If you want to export the migration planner with this map, you have the ability to do that here. It will export into Visio. So all of this data is exportable no matter what you're looking at. There is no way to import data into the portal since all of this data is static. While we're collecting it over that 14-day period, it's important to note that you won't actually be able to see the data trickling in. It will just give you an active versus inactive status of each individual VM or server. And then another thing to note, I can't remember if Antonio mentioned in the beginning, but the minimum required for the agent to run is for 14 days. However, if you guys want to run it longer than that, you can, depending on what their environment looks like and what type of customer they are. You can run that agent to 30 days. I have one right now that's running it for 3 months, depending on, what is going on. If they want to get an accurate right size of their environment for that ROI and, the high and the low points, it doesn't have to just be the 14 days. So that is something that can be tweaked on the front end. All right, if we don't, any more questions?
There are not any more questions in the queue, but I did post an email address contact for everybody in your chat window. So if you have any questions after the fact, you can post them there. You can also reach out to Tim via the Yammer group, and I'm sure we'd be happy to help facilitate that discussion. So I think, Tim, we can turn it back over to you, and we'll bring up your presentation to continue on some of the tips and tricks stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. And yeah, and thanks everybody from BitTitan to do that demo. That was awesome. And let's just review why that's important, right? Why is it important for you to be aware of that tool as a partner? Well, first of all, if you're utilizing that Azure Everywhere funding to do an assessment or a proof of concept, you essentially get access, free access to that tool. That's very important. A lot of my successful partners that are doing, Linux infrastructure, lift and shift, utilize that tool to do that initial assessment. So think about, getting the tool, the agents installed, and getting that running and monitoring the customer's environment such that when you actually get there to do that workshop or proof of concept, you have all that data at hand. That's very, very valuable and shows incredible value to the customer as soon as you get on site. So think about that. The one thing that I would say as well is I believe the tool will be updated soon to be able to actually do the migration of the VMs also to Azure. So again, when you think about that tool, think about it as reducing the cost of sales, just like we're doing with the Azure Everywhere funding and go-to-market. And this tool can help you get that assessment done, get you that extra 2K, and begin to move and consume some Azure. So with that, I'll start kicking on to the rest of the slides. So the first thing that I want to do is, as we go through the resources that are available to you as a partner, one program that I want to bring out that's critically important, and I've got members of the team like Nick and Donnie on here, but the P-Seller program is very, very critical. Probably most of you have heard it. You probably already a P-Seller, but if you haven't, our P-Seller program is really the way that we go after getting a partner resource, right? And it's actually the co-engagement model that we have with partners. So if you think about the Microsoft field and the set of field sellers that we have, when they need to get a technical resource or a selling resource for a specific thing, and specifically I would say, open source, right? In Microsoft, we obviously do not have, some of our cloud solution architects do understand open source, but from a selling perspective, there really isn't that knowledge. So the P-Seller program gives that ability to reach out to a partner that can be brought into an opportunity and then talk about a specific workload. The great thing that I like about the P-Seller that you need to be aware of, if you're technical, and most of you are on this call, is it gives you the ability to essentially become a seller for Microsoft, but also get access to our network. So it allows you to VPN in and get a badge access to Microsoft. That is very, very important, especially on a technical side. We're going to go through some of the resources, and I'll point out the resources that we have in Microsoft's internal network. If you're a P-Seller, you could VPN and get access to that are absolutely fantastic. Detailed training sessions, detailed selling slides, etc., that you can get access to. So if you have not heard of the P-Seller, I strongly recommend that you think about it and engage your Microsoft contacts to become a P-Seller. In fact, my go-to or my ask of you, specifically in open source, is we need more open source P-Sellers. In fact, we just changed the taxonomy to identify specific open source P-Sellers because the demand is so huge within the US. So if you want to become a P-Seller, and you're doing open source, please reach out to me through Yammer or via email. The next piece I want to talk about is the digital partner of record. Now, normally the business side and business folks of partners understand the digital partner of record, but let me focus this on with a technical aspect. So when you think about digital partner record, if you're not aware of that, that is essentially where a partner can assign themselves to a customer's Azure subscription. Now, what does that do? From a business sense and cutting cost of goods sold, it gives you money back when that customer begins consuming. So let's think about the scenario that we just went through with BitTitan. You go out, you do an assessment, you run their tool, and then you do the lift and shift of those Linux and Windows machines to Azure. Any Azure consumption that they start consuming, any of the VMs, the network and storage that they start consuming, you then get paid on, which is 15%. So you can just think about it. It could be quite a lot of money, especially when you're lifting and shifting large data centers. But it's not just specifically, I would say, important for you to realize why that's important to the partner. It's important to the customer, and it's actually good for the customer to assign who the partner is that did that work on that subscription. And the reason why that's important for the customer is it allows them to get further funding for advanced workloads in Azure. So, for example, you do the lift and shift of VMs. If you become digital partner of record, the customer then can go back to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a big data solution using open source. You can then get extra funding from Microsoft to help them with that. So it's good for the customer. It's great for the partner because you're getting that 15%. But here's the big deal. Internally at Microsoft, this is the way we assess how successful a partner is by that digital partner of record. So the more you assign that digital partner of record, the more work we see, Microsoft see you doing, and that means that, we see your success and you're on our radar. So I strongly recommend you do that. There are some situations where digital partner record assignment is difficult. It could be because multiple partners are working on the same subscription, etc. There is scenarios where that is an issue. But what I would recommend for all of you that are listening, if you've done work and you've helped the customer with Azure, you can't get digital partner record, that will be when you reach out to your Microsoft contact, because there is ways that we can still make sure that you are assigned or you get that success or that win of that customer. So the next piece I wanted to talk about was demo testing resources, right? So first off, ways to access Azure. I just want to make sure that you do understand as a partner, you do get access to certain Azure credits. So, for example, if you're a silver partner, you can get 6,000, 6K of Azure credits. If you're a gold partner, that's 12,000, and that's a very big deal for you to be able to do testing, etc., or demo to a customer. Also, if you've got MSDN, they give you, and I use it very regularly, $150 per month for you to be able to play around in Azure. If you're a P seller, and we talked about that program previously, you get an extra $200 per month to be able to play around with that Azure. So it's critical that you're aware of that. And then there's other resources that we have as for demoing and testing. Here, actually, I think we were saying demos.microsoft.com. At the end of the call, I'll actually bring up my desktop and show you some of the websites that we have available. But basically, this is like a hands-on lab website where you can go to and actually do a demo or actually walk through certain workloads. It's a very useful website, and I'll show you that at the end. The cloud platform immersion, again, that's in the hands-on lab website that I'll show you at the end. And then GitHub actually has, and actually GitHub is now the place to go, but it has a set of demos that are available. And again, I'll show you this, and the links are in the slides. It gives you multiple scripts that actually set up a demo and actually will walk you through. It's a fantastic resource. We do mention here Microsoft Script Center. That's sort of not used that much. Most of our work that we do for demos, including the community, goes to GitHub. I'm finding a lot of my partners now are creating IP specifically on open source. around ARM templates, getting those ARM templates and then actually moving it to the Azure Marketplace for sale as a lead, if you will, for generating opportunities with customers. If you are interested in that, there is a process to go through on that. Again, reach out to me on that, and we can help you with those ARM templates and also putting that into things like Azure Test Drive and also the Azure Marketplace. So one thing that we all have a problem with is keeping up with the latest information. Everything's changing rapidly in the cloud. So what I've done in this slide, and I'm not showing you all the URLs, but I have given a list of all of the communities I think that you should become a member of, including the partner community, which you are already a member of, but also other partner communities. One thing I do recommend is the MSDN Channel 9. I think Channel 9 comes from United Airways. I think that's where you could listen to the pilots, etc., and ground control. But Channel 9 gives you a lot of information on anything that we're releasing. In fact, further down on this bullet point, you'll see the Azure Partner Readiness Catalog. Most of the content that actually shows is through Channel 9 itself, but it's a very, very useful resource for new content that's coming out on Azure. Microsoft Mechanics, that's more focused on the Office and the security side. And then in this slide, I actually have all the social feeds that you can join. So, whether it's Mark Rusunovich or other big names in the Azure community, I have given you the Twitter that you can join, etc. So this slide, just so you know, actually has all of those links in that you can begin to use to keep up to date. One thing that we do get, a request for is what is the roadmap and how do we give feedback on certain products. Most of the time the feedback obviously will be coming through the enablement team unit as you're working with us, as you're developing your practices, but Azure feedback site is out there, and the link is in the slides, but it's a way that you can actually give feedback to the team, and the engineering team do review that, and that affects the way that the engineering goes forward in the future. So I strongly recommend that you check that out. Obviously, we have the Cloud Platform Roadmap, which will show you where we're going in the next phases of each of the products that we have in Azure. And again, follow the social feeds. The last bullet is any keynotes that we're currently doing. So that could be Ignite, Build, etc. We tend to stream and make them available on demand through Channel 9 or MSDN. So all of the keynotes, if you've missed them, such as Ignite, you can actually go back and on demand look at those sessions, which is very, very useful. So that's free. Training and certifications. So this one's important, and I'm going to start to share my desktop here so I can show you some of the links. But a lot of the partners that are joining this community are new to Microsoft and need to get certain certifications. It's been very problematic recently because the content has been old. It has just been updated, and we now have that new content for the new certifications. The good news is that the content has been refreshed, and also we just announced today, and I will be sending this out, a set of events or calls to do a study on each of the certifications. So think of these as events where you can get together with other partners and you will be all studying and prepping for each of these certifications. So I will actually send that out to you at the end of this call. But the most important point that I want to make here is, remember, the content has just been updated. We now have content that's available through MVA that's on the new content, and we have these new study groups that we're going to set up through the partner community. Through MPN, you can get access to certain learning paths that will enable you to get those certifications. And then obviously you're going to be following our communities, etc. We will post certain events that we think will help you in those certifications on the Yammer groups. Here's just a list of the certain certs that we have available. A lot of you will be interested in the Linux plus the Azure cert, and I have links to each one of those in these slides. So let me just do a quick presentation here of my desktop and show you some of these resources. Hopefully my desktop will start to show soon.
It is up and looking good.
Okay, fantastic. So let's talk about some of the resources that we have. Yes, I have a lot of tabs open, but the first one I'll show you is the new certification for Linux on Azure. The details are here. Remember, I've got all the links in the slides, so I don't want you to be jotting all of this stuff down. But we work with the Linux Foundation. Remember, we just made that announcement that we've joined the Linux Foundation as a platinum member. But this is an exam that you should be looking at. The next slide that I have here is the Readiness Catalog. And Nick, actually, I'm pretty impressed with the updates that they've made just recently. But they've updated the content, and it has a lot of content on the new functionality in Azure. I'm just listing here. When I go to this site, just as a tip, I always list by date, so the newest content first. So we've got here things like back up your Azure automation modules, Azure networking, VNet architecture best practices update. So a lot of great content that you can drill into. And if you look at it and you actually drill into it, a lot of that content actually then spins up, and it's just actually a video that is on channel 9. Well, actually, this is actually in Azure itself. In fact, all the documentation that we put into Azure, documentation on our services, etc., is pushed to this website, but is actually first goes through GitHub. And I was talking about the Azure Marketplace previously. That Azure Marketplace documentation, we're actually working with some of the partners, maybe they're on the call right now, on how you get those Azure templates and move them to Marketplace. So those documentation, again, is an open source thing through GitHub that you can contribute to. Here's the hands-on labs that I was talking about. So this website basically will give you a set of self-paced labs that you can begin to look at certain features. Most of it is focused on, I would say, the mostly on-prem and our on-prem solutions, but it is getting updated with more and more of the Azure services. But it gives you a really good way to get up, set up a lab, and walk through it yourself at your own pace. So again, great resource. We talked very briefly as well about GitHub. Anything that we do, as far as documentation goes to GitHub, but also our community and Microsoft, any demos that they do, they will create, they will publish that onto GitHub, and you can get access to it. So here we can see there's a Xamarin and Azure batted together demo. You could access that, download it, and begin to use it. So I strongly recommend that you look at that GitHub for anything to short-circuit developing a demo. There are, what do we have out here? It looks like over 900 results on some demos. Here's the Channel 9 site that I talked about. I think I'm in this website at least 3 times a week reviewing new content. Pretty much every time there is an announcement or a new technology becomes available, it actually is broadcast here on Channel 9. So here actually is Ross Gardner, who, remember, he did our last community call. He's talking about, on Azure Friday, scaling Azure Container Services. So great content. Some of it is actually very detailed and very technical. So it's not just a marketing site. This is definitely technical detail that you're going to get into. Obviously, the big site that all of you should have in your favorite is the Microsoft plus open source, or open.microsoft.com. This is a fantastic site for only the announcements that we make when it comes to open source, but it also has some incredible technical content. Kushak actually does some really good content on various open source technical deep dives. So here he just recently did one, how to installing Cloudera Enterprise on Azure. So great resource, and again, the technical detail that you'll be looking for. His Virtual Academy, I actually posted on Yammer a whole set of Virtual Academy courses that I think open source partners should be looking at. But this is, again, the site that you should be going to have a look at what's available out there. Again, I'm sorting this by publish date. You want to make sure you've got the latest content. But a tremendous amount of resources available in the Virtual Academy. Again, remember, we're announcing the new study groups that we're setting up for your Azure certifications. I'll send them out after this meeting. But those study groups will actually go over the contents within MVA that you should be looking at. If you do become a P-seller, that means you get access to our corporate network. And that means you get access to things like our MSW, which is our intranet site, which allows you to do searches on various other things. But that gives you content to Infopedia. Infopedia is an internal resource, again, only available if you're a P-seller and you've got that networking access. But this is the go-to resource for all pre-sales material. This is where I go for compete information. This is where I go for slides about a new specific Azure service. Infopedia is the place that Microsoft internal folks and sellers go to. And I strongly recommend, if you're a P-seller, you should have this as one of your favorites. The other thing that you actually will get access to, and Nick, I'm pretty sure that this is the case now, but partners are being able to get access to what we call Tech Ready. Tech Ready is actually our internal training so all Microsoft technical folks go to get updated on new technology. It's 300 level, 200 level, sometimes 400 level training that we do internally. And we're beginning to open that up to the partners, and you can actually begin to go to that Tech Ready training. So what I'm showing here is when we do those trainings, we record everything just like we're recording the session right now, and it is made available on the intranet. So if you are a P-seller, you can get access to this, and then you can actually view the content of our internal training. Obviously, we have, let's go through. We also have our Cloud and Enterprise Ready, which is several resources, and there's actually a term. This probably would be a talk in itself, but very detailed, both online and roadshows, and a boot camp that the CNE team put on. And what I'd actually bring up right now is, now not everybody that's on this call will be able to have access, but we're going to be doing a new CNE boot camp coming up in February. If you're a partner and you're managed, I strongly recommend you reach out to your Microsoft contact to see if you can get on, if you've never been to the boot camp. It's essentially a 5-day 300 to 400 level training to get you up to speed on the entire Azure platform. It contains 2 tracks. There's one for if you're brand new to the Microsoft ecosystem. They will get you on board on that. If you want a more technical deep dive on a certain area, they now have a track for that technical training. It is coming up, we can see here, in February 13th to the 17th. Again, if you are a managed partner and you have some contacts at Microsoft, I'd reach out and see if you can actually, get onboarded through this bootcamp training. So let me just stop there. Do we have any questions, Nick?
There are not any in the queue at this point.
Let me just stop and represent the slides. So the next piece here is support. So let's be very quick here because I think I've only got 6 minutes. But support, what I would say is if you're a partner, you're working with a customer, and you have any issues, whether it's Azure or maybe it's even your own demo, what I recommend is always escalate early and often. Most of the partners that I manage, that is the message that I give them. You shouldn't be spending days trying to work on something. Escalate to whoever your contact is at Microsoft. Make sure if you do open up support case, you mark it the correct severity. In my case, if you're working with a customer, that should normally be a severity A. But escalate and escalate often, and make sure you use your contacts at Microsoft. What many people are not aware of is we do have technical and pre-sales and deployment service that are available through Microsoft. I have a lot of partners that utilize that. If the opportunity is over a certain value, you get that for free. So think about that. You get a Microsoft technical specialist that can help you in a pre-sales capacity working with a customer. So I've had partners that have utilized this where, their solution touches on a technology they may not be that they might not be that knowledgeable about, and then they'll bring in this technical pre-sales and they can help them fill the actual picture and make sure they're talking to the customer in the correct way. There's different levels of support, the signature cloud support that you get, and then upping that up to different levels. So advanced support for partners and then premier support for partners. I actually used to be in premier myself. I would highly recommend it if you are a managed service provider that is providing these managed services, so it's actually critical that you get any severity A issues or critical issues get resolved as quickly as possible. Premier support would be the way to go. One thing you should always remember about support, it's all about how to escalate. Remember, when you open up a case, it tends to default to a severity C. So you're talking days before anybody's going to get back to you. If it is a service outage affecting a customer, you mark it a severity A. Tell the person on the phone or via the website that it is a server down situation or a service loss, and mark it a Sev A. And that way you will get the SLAs increase or decreased, meaning people will be answering that call and addressing the issue as quickly as possible. Let's just quickly go through some of these. A lot of the partners that are coming on board from open source are very familiar with AWS. Remember, and I've got this in the slides, we actually do have a mapping. So the URLs here where you can map AWS services to Azure services, that's very useful for some of my partners. And remember also, we actually through Readiness have a free training course for Azure for AWS professionals. If you're managed by me, you probably already have that link, but if you don't, reach out to me and I can get that for you. One other thing, a lot of customers push back on the cloud and they push back on, maybe it's security or we don't know how you run your data center. You can actually do a data center tour. This is very, very useful for, some of the biggest customers that we've worked with. It's very impressive. When you request that data center tour and you actually go on the data center tour, it is very impressive. They walk you through the whole data center, and what I found is most customers at the end of that, they are like, wow, Microsoft's running their data centers better than we can ever imagine. That's the way we're going to go forward. You've already seen this slide. This is a complete list of all of the links that you should think of to be informed as a US partner. So again, this is in the slides. Here's a familiar slide for all of you that are working on open source. It's basically showing what our high-value workloads are. Enterprise Linux, dev testing, open source data infrastructure, etc. My call to action is, if you are an open source partner and you are not currently working with me, that's Tim Walton, or Donnie Hall, you should reach out to me. There's my email address, and tell me what your OSS practice does. You know, and specifically of those high-value workloads, such as enterprise Linux, cloud infrastructure, etc. Let us know what it is. I want that awareness. Right now, I'm actually going to be going to Seattle, or I should say Bellevue, Washington, to discuss this and go over our open source partner portfolio. So please notify me if you do have a practice and you are delivering some kind of service based on these high-value workloads. The second action item I have for all of you is Ross Godler had presented ACS. We showed that it was open source with support for multiple orchestrators, for example, Kubernetes, DCOS, etc. What the big ask, and this comes from Ross himself, is we need partners that can deliver ACS to customers, including that orchestration layer. Remember, ACS can deliver managed services, but it is not opinionated about what the application is. So we need partners. Again, if you are wanting to go down the path of ACS and become a specialist, let me know. I can get you training on that. Also, if you're already doing it and you're already working on an ACS and that becoming part of your practice, reach out to me again so that I can make Ross aware of what you're doing and make sure that he's aware of it, and we can put that into the partner portfolio itself. So with that, I'll end. That is the call to action. Two things. Send me what your practice is. If you're doing open source, let me know so I'm aware of it and I can make the rest of Microsoft sellers aware of it. Also, if you're interested in developing ACS as a practice or skill set, reach out to me. And with that, Nick, I'll finish up.
Thanks, Tim. That is the end of today's call. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will see you on next month's call, and join us on the Yammer group between now and then. Have a great day, everybody.